Live from WTTW 11. This is Chicago Tonight.
The history of Chicago is seen through three of its historic hotels, the Drake, the Hilton, and the Palmer House. The author is here with his new book, Chicago's Grand Hotels. In his new book, Chicago's Grand Hotels, author Robert Allegrini writes that fancy hotels are places where, quote, the ordinary rules of life are suspended a little bit. Chicago has a rich history of these great hotels, and for some insight into what kinds of rules were suspended, what types of characters they attracted, and why these hotels are becoming relics, I'm joined by Robert Allegrini. Robert, welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Real pleasure to be here.
First, quick question. The cover of your book.
It's a great evocative shot, isn't it? It's of an Escoffier Society dinner taken in the Gold Coast Room in 1968. In the Escoffier Society, which still exists today, their bylaws stipulate that there should be 99 people around one table with a seat at the end of the table left vacant in the memory of the French culinary master Escoffier. And also, according to the bylaws of the society, their napkins have to be tucked into their tuxedos. So you can still see that in hotels today.
It looks like they're all going to have lobster. And
it's a great shot. It really speaks to the grandeur of the hotels that we're talking about this evening.
One of the things you're, the key attraction of the book is just the great pictures, and let's look at some of them. Starting with the Palmer House.
Yes, absolutely.
And this was this hotel. You say there's a triad of hotels, but what is this picture we're looking at?
There are actually three Palmer Houses, and we're looking at the second of the three Palmer Houses to grace Chicago. The first one burnt down in the Great Chicago Fire 13 days after it had opened. So Potter Palmer, the proprietor, not being one to be deterred easily, went out and secured a loan and built this hotel 2 years later, which was the first fireproof hotel in the world. It also was the first hotel to be completely lit with electric light, the first hotel to have a telephone in every room, and the first hotel to employ a perpendicular railroad. Now, do you know what a perpendicular railroad was?
Well, something tells me it might have been an elevator.
Yes, the savior of many a bellman, but it was the first hotel to employ an elevator as well.
We have a picture. We have a picture of the hotel's lobby. Let's go to that one and take a look.
Absolutely.
This lobby has. Well, George Will, for example, didn't he write some kind of a love letter to this lobby?
He wrote a whole column calling the Palmer House lobby the essence of lobbiness, and saying that it was, in fact, comparable to the Sistine Chapel because of its magnificent ceiling, which actually was 21 separate paintings that were shipped from France in 1926 to put into the Palmer House. This is the third Palmer House, which is the current Palmer House. That other Palmer House that you just saw was actually taken down in halves, and this one put up in halves, so that in fact the hotel can claim to never have closed, and as such is the oldest hotel in continual operation in North America.
You know, we have a lot of pictures of the Palmer House. Let's just run through the pictures and just give me a beat on each of this. What are we looking at here?
That's the legendary Empire Room of the Palmer House, which was in its heyday the top supper club in all of Chicago. It was the place where Frank Sinatra performed. Yes, another picture of the Empire Room, but it was also a place where stars were born. Liberace was first found in the Empire Room of the Palmer House,
Is that right?
As was Bob Fosse. But it had a run of 43 years, which is really amazing.
What are we looking at here? That
this
looks
is
like one of our
Clinton's,
presidents.
Yes, speaking to the crowd at the Palmer House, and this shot speaks of the fact that every president since Ulysses S. Grant has been to the Palmer House. President Clinton was particularly fond of the Palmer House. He kept two pictures of the Palmer House in his office, one of his parents in the Empire Room and another of him at the Democratic primary.
And on to the Drake?
On to the Drake, okay. And the Drake, we have a wonderful picture that we should be seeing coming up here of the Oak Street Beach. There we go. And it is a picture that shows that the Drake was opened up really as the first urban resort in Chicago. And it was a very remote location at its time. In its time, it was a remote outpost of the city's downtown, and the downtown actually grew to the Drake. But when it first opened, you can see some of the original ads of the Drake called for horseback riding as one of the options when you went to the Drake.
I don't think that happens much anymore, but the Cape Cod Room hasn't changed much over the years.
Cape Cod Room is one of the rooms that's legendary in Chicago. It's been open since 1933 for the Century of Progress exhibition. And if you go up to the bar in the Cape Cod Room, for example, the bartender will be happy to show you two sets of initials that were carved into the bar for MM and JD, which is actually Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio. It's just,
they're still there? Those?
They're still there, and the bartenders will be happy to show you. But it speaks to the rich history in that room.
And
of course,
speaking of celebs?
yes, any discussion of the Drake has to include their most famous guests of recent memory, the late, great Princess Diana, who stayed there for 3 days. Hard to believe that it was 10 years ago next year that Princess Diana was a guest at the Drake, and next year will be the 10th anniversary. There'll be a big retrospective of photos at the Drake of her visit to the hotel.
And on to the Hilton?
On to the Hilton. The Hilton, when it opened, was the largest hotel in the world. It had 3,000 rooms in 1927. It also had a rooftop miniature golf course. People had never seen a hotel like the Hilton when it opened.
Was that the first miniature golf course?
Very, well, certainly the first in a hotel that I could think of. But it was such a hotel that the Vice President of the United States actually came to be the first registered guest of the Hilton.
Is that right?
And in addition to the golf course, it had a ton of other amenities.
Well, we actually had presidents coming to the Hilton. There's President Kennedy in the
Great
tuxedo.
shot of
right
President
behind
Kennedy.
him, over his shoulder, is Mayor Richard J. Daley.
That's correct. Also a frequent guest of the hotel. But President Kennedy, when he was president, was there often. And actually, so was, as you can see here, Queen Elizabeth was a guest of the hotel when she came in 1959 to open the St. Lawrence Seaway. An interesting story about when the Queen was there. Richard Daley, who you see on the left, was her host, along with Conrad Hilton, who was on her right. But he caused a bit of a protocol stir, Richard Daley did at the time, because he sat down before the Queen did.
Oh, no.
And of course, the Brits were all in a snitch because of that. But
yes,
he recouped nicely.
Yes,
it was an innocent error.
But the King of Chicago does
not have to take precedence over the Queen
of England.
Absolutely.
What do we have coming up here? This next picture.
Very famous photograph of the '68 Democratic Convention, when all the world was watching as riots unfolded in front of the Hilton, which was at that time the headquarters for the Democratic Party. And a couple of great stories from that incident. Well, we're moving on to
anyway,
one more. Okay.
Robert, real quick, your official job is a public relations person for all three hotels, but you've come together, you've put this book together. Let me ask you, why are they becoming rare? Last question.
A couple of reasons. One of them is economics. Really, it's hard even to find people to restore these hotels properly. When they restored the ceiling of the Empire, of the Palmer House, they had to get someone who actually had worked on the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican to restore it. Another one is changing taste. Regrettably, there are a growing number of Gen Xers and Gen Yers who disdain anything formal and really are not accustomed to being in opulent surroundings. So I would say to parents who are concerned about this, take your children down to these hotels, because they're great conduits to learning manners, to learning etiquette, and really to learning Chicago history, because to know the history of these hotels is to know the history of Chicago.
And a good history book is Chicago's Grand Hotels by Robert Allegrini. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.